you can count when you're happy. 1, 2, 3, 4, you can count when you're sad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or count when you're frightened. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, count when you're mad. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Counting is wonderful. Counting is marvelous. Counting's terrific and how.
The episode opens catching us up to speed on Henry Small and Lana's budding father-daughter relationship, not to recap for new viewers, but because we haven't seen any of that in recent episodes. I haven't seen or heard from Henry Small since Suspect, and that was almost 2 DVDs ago. Suddenly they're joined at the hip and seem to be pitching a really unfunny and preachy spin-off sitcom about the dangers of big business and the joys of horseback riding. It would be called Good Things Come in Small Packages, and it would air right after Byron the Poetic Werewolf. Lana invites Henry to a writing competition, and he says he'll definitely be there, but his wife Jennifer can't make it, and it's clearly not because she has a more pressing engagement. Lana doesn't seem totally surprised, surmising that Jennifer hasn't accepted her yet. Somewhere off screen, Jennifer's gone from wanting to keep Lana from getting hurt to being jealous of Lana for monopolizing Henry's time and attention. She thinks he's lost interest in her now, and she's filing for divorce, which Henry doesn't know about, and he swears things between them aren't that bad. Lana conveniently finds out that when she sees Jennifer on the sidewalk with some guy she's awfully friendly with, and Jennifer explains that she's filing papers so Lana won't think she's sleeping around. Here's an idea. Maybe meet your divorce lawyer like in an office rather than right outside the coffee shop where your stepdaughter, who you've decided has put a wedge in your marriage, is working. And speaking of wedges, Lana has also managed to put one of those between Clark and Chloe, who are on the outs because Clark doesn't think Chloe's hot enough to make a priority, and he's not getting his riveting articles in the Torch out on time. He was supposed to get her an article about the debate team, but he went with Lana to a writing lesson instead. Maybe Chloe's first mistake was expecting a passive and terrible liar with zero interest and no ambition to write about people whose favorite pastime is trying to persuade other people they're right in an argument. Clark doesn't like that she's making a big deal out of it, so in the heat of the moment, he suggests he just quit, and she agrees. Oh, well, good job, Clark. You can make a convincing argument. I guess making Clark Kent passionate about journalism in high school is too easy. See, in real life, everyone hates the very idea of doing what becomes their lifelong ambition later on. That would be like if I loved Smallville when it aired, and then spent a ridiculous amount of time meticulously writing about everything that was wrong with it years later, when there was already another Superman-related TV show on and it wasn't relevant anymore. Oh, wait. Chloe tries not to blame it all on Lana, but if she was any more jealous, she'd try to recreate the accident that turned Tina Greer into a shapeshifter and just steal her life. So when Clark calls her on it later, saying she keeps looking at him like he's cheating on her, she flat out says he's wrong and that maybe they shouldn't hang out anymore. But Chloe, I have photographic proof. This is undeniably, indisputably, unquestionably love triangle face. By the end of the episode, Lana realizes that she's the reason the relationships of the 3 people she most cares about are on the verge of Krypton-level explosion. That's the thread that ties these 2 relationship dramas together. Lana Lang is poison. There's this moment where I actually feel kind of bad for her, which I'm sure will wear off as soon as she starts acting insufferably selfish again. When she tells Clark she wishes there was something she could do to help, and he says there's not, with an expression she should be able to read right through that says, because if it wasn't for my pesky infatuation with you, I'd be able to maintain relationships and act like a rational person. Of course, it isn't really Lana's fault that she's the source of strife for both of these couples, but it feels almost like the producers are so frustrated with their own inability to find an interesting and compelling role for Lana in the show that they're taking it out on Lana herself. Meanwhile, we discover Lionel is still stockpiling kryptonite when a gang of super strong high school kids literally knocks over one of his armored cars to steal a bunch of refined meteor rock, in an operation that would make Oliver Queen proud. Eric Marsh is their ringleader, and he's somehow discovered a kryptonite cocktail that, when inhaled via an asthma inhaler, temporarily gives you super strength, which he's using in a scheme to nab a baseball scholarship and move all the way to the majors. I have no idea how he found out Lionel has the meteor rock, but the mystery of what Lionel is doing doing with the rocks and how much he really knows about Clark deepens as Lionel makes a special trip to Lex's mansion to feel Lex out and determine if he stole the kryptonite, under the pretense of congratulating him on his impending nuptials. I like that added touch of pretending like he doesn't know Helena's name, when of course they conspired together earlier in the season. Helena herself doesn't appear this episode. Clark failed to foil the robbery at the beginning because these guys were too strong for him, but he's able to put his incredible sleuthing skills to work and piece together who was involved because he knows the guy has a class ring and a plate in his head since he conveniently x-rayed Marsh to find the plate and spent an unusually long time staring at the ring, so us drooling couch potatoes would pat ourselves on the back for remembering that oh-so-subtle clue. We linger on that ring so long, I fully expected this to be yet another Red Kryptonite episode. It's a good thing Clark didn't get too close to the green K, or these super strong jocks might have broken his skin and lodged some red K in him, turning him into the Kryptonian god of super teenage rebellion faster than you can say Christmas colors. But in bullet time. Clark finds Eric in his gang's hideout, but he's found out before he can make a rude super speed exit. I can never tell if Clark is close enough to be affected by kryptonite in this episode, or if he's so rattled by the notion of going up against more than one Kryptofreak with super strength that he's forgotten he has other superpowers. But he gets overpowered pretty easily and thrown into the furnace, like Hansel and Gretel getting tossed into the oven, if they were lured into the witch's house by the one thing that kills them rather than candy and gingerbread. I like Eric's line there. If he goes, our problems go with him. Thanks. I'd have never figured out your rationale for this instantly conceived murder without that. Oh, and why are all the ex-home improvement kids turning into psychopathic superpowered killers? After they leave, Clark busts out of the furnace and is, naturally, completely nude, as we can see in this dramatic pose that's there, I don't know, to give the ladies some eye candy, or to make this situation feel more epic, or both. And once again, Clark's given a really good reason to consider putting a costume together. A, the bozos who overpowered him at least wouldn't know who they threw in the furnace, and can't take it out on his parents later when they discover he's still alive, which is exactly what they end up doing. And B, maybe something fireproof so you're not super speeding all over Smallville looking for a pair of boxers or briefs every time you're in an explosion. But nope, because apparently your future Superman has to be a certified ding-dong to uphold the no flights, no tights mandate. After a conversation with his folks where Clark decides not to go to the police because he, in his words, doesn't want to be under Sheriff Adams' radar again, you know, after he threw a kid across a windshield last episode and wound up in the closest thing to a costume he's worn so far, Clark once again proves his above-average IQ and calls in an anonymous tip. The sheriff finds enough evidence in Eric's locker that he robbed Lionel's truck, and Clark decides it would be a good idea as he's being arrested to stand on the other side of the fence and silently gloat at Eric so he knows exactly who called in the tip. Thus the parent kidnapping later. What was the point of that? Marsh may never have discovered Clark was still alive, holed away in prison, where he probably doesn't get the Smallville torch, and Clark's name might not have been in that anymore anyway since he's not working there. And when he did get out, Clark would have the element of surprise, and it might dawn on him he has a bunch of other powers he could use to stop and expose these kryptonite sniffers. But Jonathan and Martha haven't been kidnapped in a really long time, and we're running out of ways to physically challenge Clark, so we've got to manufacture some stakes somehow. Manufactured stakes. Anyway, Lex bails Eric out in exchange for information about Lionel's truck, but that backfires on him, and the Kents end up paying for it. Shocker. Eric knocks out the guard Lex had on him. Man, those Luthor security guard salaries must be going up every episode right now, and he goes after Clark's parents in retaliation. Good thing Clark confronted Eric, or they'd have been strung up on the barn wall until the end of the school day. Oh, and the Talon got vandalized, and Eric sort of implies he did that too, but by the end, it turns out he wasn't involved at all, and that seems to be an unorthodox strategy on Lionel's part, who learned about the robbery in the first place, somehow or rather from the high school paper, I have to assume because he's been learning everything he can about Clark. He seems to vandalize the torch and pretend like he didn't do it to make Chloe vulnerable so she'll agree to get in bed with him, figuratively of course, and he bribes her with new and updated computers in a column at the Daily Planet, which she initially questions but ultimately jumps at. Clark pulls his parents off the wall, a chore exactly no one can relate to, and he implores them to leave town. Jonathan argues, but Clark wins this debate too, saying it's not safe for them because Eric knows about his powers and can't be stopped. Jonathan beams with pride at the sense of responsibility and courage his son is displaying, and then proceeds to remind him of the obvious. that he has other powers beyond super strength. And he says he and Martha will stay with Clark's grandfather in Metropolis for a few days. His grandfather? You mean Martha's father? You know, the one you punched in the face when he wouldn't give you his daughter's hand in marriage? The one you wouldn't take money from to help you get on your feet, and who you threw off the farm and said would never change and it wasn't possible for Clark to have a relationship with? Yeah, that's what Jonathan would do. No, he takes some of that unexplained extra money they've suddenly had lying around lately, when they were in massive dire straits to the point of maybe losing the farm earlier in the season, and rent a hotel room. Lex hatches a scheme to fake another armored truck run to follow Eric to his hideout, and tells Clark about it, justifying his decision to bail Eric out by claiming he thinks Lionel is moving kryptonite in order to restart his level 3 experiments. Clark buys it and stops interrogating Lex and tries to get involved in his plan. When Lex tells him to go home, not wanting to endanger him any more than he already has, Clark follows Lex on his sting operation, knocks him out, and stops Eric and his goons all by himself, and pretty easily with his genius maneuvers of super speed and heat vision. Eric gets all the best lines this episode. When he knows he's beaten and Clark gives him the chance to surrender, he says, "Don't you understand, Kent? It's done." It's done? What does that mean? Clark's not the only one who doesn't understand. The Kryptonite Steroid Brigade goes to jail. Per Clark's advice, Lana tells Henry he needs to prioritize his wife and save his marriage, and Clark convinces Lana to go through with her riding competition regardless of Henry's absence, with her horse, Donatello. Wait, Donatello? What happened to Tyson? Did he get sick again, and there wasn't a Kryptofreak or a magic healing spaceship to save him, so he died off screen and we're just not mentioning that? And having lost everything she cares about and driving the man of her dreams away, Chloe makes a deal with the devil and begins her emo/revenge phase. Then credits. The best thing about this episode is its sense of continuity. There's a fairly intriguing mystery brewing involving Lionel's interest in Clark and kryptonite. Just how much has he figured out versus what Lex knows? Has he put more together on the alien front? Lex is, at least right now, a misguided protagonist rather than the series antagonist, so we're more or less in his head, and we know most of what he knows. He obviously hasn't figured out Clark has powers or that he's from another planet, though he has to have his suspicions or he's as daft as, well, Clark through most of this episode. But Lionel is a total wild card. He may very well know that Clark is from wherever the meteor rocks came from, or at the very least, that he has powers and that kryptonite is, for some reason, his weakness. Remember, he had a file on Clark in the same vault he kept that first batch of refined kryptonite in, and there's no way to know how long he's been able to see. If he saw Clark use his powers back in Red, pretending to be blind, he knows more than anyone apart from the Kents and Pete. This isn't ultimately going to resolve in a remotely satisfying way, of course. I won't spoil it here, but oh boy. But at this point, when the series was airing, I was riveted by Lex and Lionel's tete-a-tete, and I couldn't wait to find out what Lionel was really up to, and whether Lex could outsmart him while playing him at his own twisted mind games. Clark and his parents suffering for the sake of Lex's curiosity is starting to get predictable and feel more contrived, but I like, at least on paper, that this time Clark knows exactly what Lex has done and the indirect way he's hurting his family, and Lex is able to dupe him into thinking that was still the right thing to do anyway by lying and saying he did it for a much more altruistic reason than the real one. It's not about level 3, it's about answers, and Lex knows Clark is at the center of that holy grail. And as hard as the show is working to make me hate Chloe and want this ill-advised partnership to end in Lionel stabbing her repeatedly in the midsection, her scenes with Lionel are the best in the episode. They're equally well acted by both Glover and Mac, and there's an unsettling chemistry there I was really blindsided by on first viewing, and it made me surprised to crave more scenes with the two of them. They echo the flashbacks in Lineage, with Lionel getting leverage over Jonathan there, pretending to help him out of the kindness of his heart, but trapping him in an impossible situation where he would be forced to do something despicable or face horrible personal consequences. We all know that's where this thing with Chloe is going, and honestly, she ought to know that as well. And yet, a billionaire offers a vulnerable, insecure high school kid the moon, she's probably gonna say yes. I want to hate this, and I can't, and that's impressive. The worst thing about this episode is its sense of continuity. For every plot thread that's logically picked up on and furthered, there's another one I find myself turning into Spock and cocking an eyebrow at. Is there no logical, non-retconny way to write Henry Small out of the show? More importantly, why are we writing Henry Small out of the show? It's like somebody decided that despite the show's difficulty in finding stuff for Lana to do, the soap opera about a blood father Lana didn't know she had just wasn't making for compelling enough drama, really past their initial awkward encounter. We do that a lot in this show. Here's a cliffhanger. This guy really is Lana's father. Oh wait, now what? Oh, they have to have a relationship we've got to flesh out or something. Well, that's no fun. Too much screen time of Lana cultivating an actual relationship with her father is time we can't spend teasing the audience about the relationship we won't let her have with Clark. Not that I've been made to care at all about the rest of Henry's family, but Jennifer is turning into a really needy and pathetic plot device she wasn't before, just so Henry can excuse himself from the show in the most melodramatic way possible. And she's at Aunt Nell status this episode. Does he get divorced? Does he ever even send Lana a Christmas card? No idea. We never see Henry again, and to my knowledge, he rarely, if ever, is even mentioned after this. And once again, we're asked to make an investment in ongoing story we drop when it's inconvenient, and that ultimately watches like we just needed something to sandwich in between commercials so we could pad each season out to the proper episode count. And wow, is this a weak set of Kryptofreaks. 3 episodes in a row now, our antagonists are a gang of teenage or early 20s one-dimensional lowlifes with zero to flimsy motivations who take gigantic risks in attacking Clark for no reason other than the episode needing to fill its action quota. Eric at least has a specific goal in mind. I have no idea what's in it for his cronies, though. Are they also looking at sports scholarships and corporate sponsorships? They certainly can't be in it for the money. All they're stealing is Media Rock. Which is, by the way, all over Smallville. Do they need to be refined for some reason? Can they not just use whatever's lying around in the quarry? Jody Melville didn't need to knock over armored cars to make her diet shakes. And if it does have to be refined Media Rock for some reason, it's awfully convenient that somebody is refining it and that Eric managed to find out about it. These guys are using inhalers. Maybe a story about a guy who always wanted to play sports but had a horrible asthma condition from birth and it was never in the cards until now, and he fights Clark despite all the bad things he knows he shouldn't do and hates himself for it because he won't let anyone take his dreams away from him. Not to rewrite the story, that's not any better than most of the Season 1 Kryptofreak reasons for being evil, but I'm just trying to prove how easy it is to come up with anything more compelling than this in like 6.5 seconds. And for all the reasons I stated earlier, Clark has a phantom zone between his ears this episode, and he's lucky he made it out of one of the most mundane and by-the-numbers Kryptofreak plots to date. And questions to ask Jarrell when I get to heaven. I've already asked all kinds of questions only Jarrell could probably answer, but I've got one more big one. How does super strength make one better at hitting a ball? Pete says Eric used to suck at playing baseball, but ever since he started inhaling Media Rock, he's stronger than Clark. You know, if he got a kryptonite tattoo, he could also walk through walls and he wouldn't even need to pick up armored cars. He could just walk right through them. But what was the problem before? He couldn't hit the ball hard enough? Did he naturally have extraordinary hand-eye coordination, but he was a weakling and all he could do was bunt? Perhaps the concoction also gives him increased visual acuity, maybe enhances some of his senses. But we're not told that, nor does he demonstrate that anywhere else but the baseball field. I also find it hard to believe he's busting scoreboards with the power of his record-breaking hits, and nobody thinks anything fishy is going on. But that's neither here nor there. And let's go on to the count. We've got one named Kryptofreak, technically 3, I guess. That's Eric Marsh. His superpower is ironic super strength by way of kryptonite inhaler, and his villain motivation is, haven't you seen a Smallville episode before? Sports make you crazy. We've got one instance of someone walking away from someone else angry. I can't believe there's not more than one of those this episode, and that's Clark when Chloe says maybe they shouldn't hang out anymore. We have finally another instance of Clark's parents being attacked or kidnapped. Don't worry, everybody, the baby's okay. For now. I really want to count convenient unconsciousness when Clark knocks Lex out. I mean, he does it on purpose. He doesn't just happen to get knocked out and he doesn't see Clark use his superpowers. superpowers, but it is a situation where he is unconscious, and the reason is so Lex can't see him use the superpowers. But it's not convenient in the classical sense. And we've got some bullet time when Eric smashes a piece of concrete over Clark's head. There's some setup for potentially juicy things to come, but a lot of precedent for good ideas to never pay off in satisfying ways, or to just go poof before they even get off the ground. Otherwise, this is about as mediocre as Smallville gets. I'm giving Witness a 2 out of 4. Was there anything I missed in any category? Leave me a personal message on Geekvolution, and I'll be sure to add it to the count. I am Captain Logan, and consider this episode counted.